For sure. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the March meeting of the Advisory Committee for Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights for the City of Bangor. We will begin tonight's meeting by introducing ourselves as members, city staff, or guests around the table. I'll begin. My name is Katie Bryden. I'm chair.
My name is Debbie Laurie, and I'm the city manager.
Courtney O'Donnell, assistant city manager.
Shane Boys, member.
Mark Roth, member.
Thank you very much. We will pause to vote on the approval of last.
You can't,
can't.
you don't have a quorum.
Will we when Melissa gets here?
Nope.
Nope, gonna need 5.
Oh, all right then.
You
We,
need 5 for quorum.
Yes, to take a vote, yes.
all right. Well, unfortunately, we do not have quorum this evening, so we will postpone the approval of last month's meeting minutes to the next meeting into April. The next thing on the meeting agenda is public comment. This is new for our committee. A public comment portion is allowing opportunity for folks to share anything that would ensure a productive and constructive conversation. I just wanted to give a few guidelines. We do ask that everyone takes a maximum of 3 minutes to share their feedback. We ask that all comments be directly related to items on our agenda or the committee's agenda or matters within the committee's jurisdiction. And also understand that the committee is not required nor expected to provide an immediate response. The input that is shared from the community is valuable and will be taken into consideration. And we ask that all conversation is respectful. We're committed to fostering a sense of peace and understanding here. And so we want all of our conversations to be held with the utmost civility. With that being said, before I open up to public comment for these expectations, we'll begin with a 15-minute period. If anyone has anything to share, then we'll close off public comment until the end of the meeting, barring we have time. Before we do that, I would like to have our Vice Chair, Melissa Buchholz, introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Buchholz, and I'm the vice chair.
Thank you, Melissa. Do we have any public comment, or if you are in the room and you want to, introduce yourself and say why you're here, or any interest that you have?
Technically, I think that you can't.
Sorry, do you mind coming to the table so the,
Hillary Simmons, resident of Bangor. My understanding is if you follow Robert's rules, that you are not allowed to continue the meeting, that you have to adjourn and not have a meeting because you do not have a quorum.
And we've asked our city solicitor is actually going to be doing an update to the GovOps committee on April 7th. It has been our long-standing practice for decades to hold meetings as long as they are publicly noticed and they're available to access. The committee will continue to follow those rules. They will not vote on everything, but they will continue the discussion. I think until we get clarification from the city solicitor that we're just going to continue our past practice.
Okay, I believe if you review a meeting that they just had Parks and Rec, he said that you follow Robert's rules so that the meeting should have been adjourned and not moved forward.
And I believe that meeting was held, was it not?
It was not by his advice.
And the city solicitor
Yep.
will be providing an update April 7th.
Thank you very much. Hello, thank you for joining us this evening. Is there anything you'd like to share or anything that we can?
Oh, nothing, we're just here to like
Observe.
view the meeting.
Great,
Cool.
We were sent here from a class that we're taking at the university.
oh, I'm so sorry. Do you mind coming to the table just so anybody watching it live can hear you?
Yeah, we're all
You're the one
that. Yeah, we're all from the University of Maine and just here on a class agenda to
Nice.
view the meeting and see how it works. But yeah, we're excited to see.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
And we welcome, any questions or feedback that you have, just
Here.
you're more than welcome to participate.
Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Nice to have guests. Oh, go ahead.
Well, last time I'm Michael Beck. I am a member of city council, but tonight I'm absolutely speaking on my own behalf, not speaking for the council, not speaking for the city, just myself as a resident and dad. And I just wanted to say, the work that's done in this advisory committee is extremely important, especially now since our federal government has sort of abdicated their duty there. So the work being done here for inclusion, for equity, is so important. And again, speaking for myself, living a life as a white, straight male and having the experiences of only a white, straight male, I've got a few blind spots, quite a few blind spots. And as a decision maker, again, speaking for myself, it is important that there are other people who are watching out and looking for those blind spots and informing me. So again, I appreciate what this advisory committee does. And I thank you. I know this is a voluntary position, usually a thankless job, and it can be tough. But I appreciate what this committee does. It's important. And I look forward to the work that you guys will continue to do. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Mr. Beck.
Thanks for your comments.
Okay, next, I'm trying my best to multitask here. The next item on our agenda, is to, any education or, event updates from our subcommittee. As you know, we work to, ensure all of our agendas follow sort of a basic streamline of giving education updates, reviewing policy and ordinances. For the education update, I know that Melissa, you were previously on the education and events committee that we had. We had 3 subcommittees that were focused in different areas. And we had recently spoken about the ways to support the MLK breakfast in the future. And I think that is just something that we're going to want to keep on our agenda and really keep moving forward with, even though it is March and MLK events happen in January. It will be here before we know it, and we always fall victim to not using time in our best interest and waiting until the last minute. I wanted to put it out there because we have this opportunity and invitation from the NAACP to partner with them and support their work on that. We had shared some ideas roughly in a very sort of informal brainstorming session to talk about ways that we could make it bigger than just the NAACP's breakfast that happens on MLK morning, typically at 8:30 for an hour with speakers. There's a real opportunity to do more engagement with the community, especially leading up to and throughout the month of January. And so I wanted to know, one, if you had any thoughts on that opportunity, or 2, if there would be anyone interested in connecting specifically with the new chair of the NAACP to sort of spearhead either an invitation to come to a subcommittee meeting when we can start that planning process, or open the invitation, get resources and information from them as to when we could meet with them. Is there any interest there, or do you have any updates? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, yeah,
No, I
my,
really am.
my thoughts is I think that, we should definitely reach out now to start to get the ball rolling, and that, I mean, depending on the new president, what her preference is,
Mhm.
that she could either come to this meeting, because I think we all would welcome that as well, but if maybe being put on the spot in the meeting is something she's not interested, I think we could grab a group of us to meet with her as well.
Okay,
And just start that planning process and give me like an introduction email going, so we can.
yep,
Start that.
okay. Is there any interest from present committee members that would want to either be involved in that process, or Shane? Yes,
Mhm.
thank you. Okay, and I can facilitate an introduction on that as well, just so that we can start that with, her name's Athena, and she's lovely. And she's the new NAACP chair, so that really gives us a great opportunity to start a relationship right off the bat with
Right.
her and support in every way. Debbie, I know you were on those calls. Am I missing anything?
So I think one thing to clarify is what they want to do is they'd like to relocate that breakfast to Bangor. So historically, it's been held at the University of Maine. Sorry if you've been going up to the University of Maine. But what they'd like to do is transition it to Bangor. So we really thought it was an opportunity to involve like the library,
Mhm.
perhaps Wabanaki, perhaps the
Mhm.
UMaine arts, and kind of create a month and recognize everything. So I think there was a lot of good partnership opportunities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification. And hopefully, like I said, they have a subcommittee too. So even if there is an opportunity for a subcommittee from this group to meet with them and share what we could do. We've made, we've had really great conversations with our chamber and with small businesses, downtown, Bangor partnership. There we go. I always want to add extra words in that one. The downtown Bangor partnership to talk about ways that we at least can uplift what's happening in the city, but also that they're aware of the work that we do and the opportunities that exist for individuals that have the bandwidth and interest in supporting these different opportunities to educate and spread awareness. So I think that if we can revisit, sort of circle back to some of those partnerships too, I think we could make it a much bigger event in Bangor, even within downtown Bangor as well. And hopefully this will set us on a path for planning ahead and really, creating some very strong, ways for engaging with the community and the different, best, interest groups that we have.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to, one thing we were talking about is just kind of with the events committee was getting the first event rolling. So I think it's kind of intimidating being like, there's so many events that we could be a part of,
Yes.
like, where do we begin? I think another part of that too is also sharing events that are happening too. And I realized I probably dropped the ball because last week I saw you there, Katie, I think in a separate context, there was the iftar supper that some community members held, which was incredible and huge. And I feel like that would have been a good thing to share. And so I'm saying this out loud only to say that that's something I should have done. And that's something that maybe we can continue to do with each other, is kind of update as events are happening, just to make sure that, we can and want to be present at those, that we are as well.
Yes, I love that. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other education updates? All right. The next thing on our agenda is the policy and ordinance bucket of our work. As I think all of us know from last month's meeting, what we did was we looked at our ordinance to really identify ways that we can be a little bit more specific in addressing some language that maybe is hindering our work, such as, if we have 9 members that have been identified to serve on this committee, but in actuality, only 5 typically show up, what is that process for identifying individuals that are not coming? How do we communicate with them? And how do we work with the personnel committee within the city of Bangor, city council, to really identify ways that we can be effective and also, stay in our lane as well, understanding the roles and expectations of that personnel committee as well. So at our last meeting, we went through, we looked at ordinance chapter 23, which really talks about what our committee's responsibilities and expectations are. I would love an update. I'm not sure if there has been an update. Did you, we made updates, we discussed any potential changes, and then the idea was that it would go to legal review.
Yes, that did happen. And in fact, the only change that they had was a reference around cause for removal, because committee members actually have some due process rights. And so it's not quite as simple as just deciding that that they should be removed, but actually giving an opportunity for hearing to hear the person out, and then the personnel committee to make a decision. So I believe what's in front of you is certainly it has at least had that first review by legal.
Wonderful. Would it be all right if we took time to look at it together?
Of course.
And
Oh, yeah, actually,
if that's possible?
Yes. Sorry, I should have been prepared for that. Let me, actually, can somebody forward it to this email and I can pull it up?
I'm
I was gonna say,
not,
can you
forward
pull it
mine?
right up
Oh,
off the
it's on,
website?
that's right. I will do that.
It's a vacation break. I
Yeah,
mean, that's you, man. That's you telling me that.
all right. That's a good call.
So right now, everybody's watching us, watch the screen.
Right, but I will start sharing now. Okay. So. Apologies for anyone at home getting homesick. There you go.
all right, thank you very much. So as you know, last meeting, we went through to really identify some key areas, most of which, the big ones that include, a designee from, well, I'll just go in order here. The first thing that we did was to identify a student participant. Right now, the expectation is that we do have a high school student and a college student in the a student attending school in Bangor and a college student attending one of the Bangor area colleges.
Then yes.
We made a flexible update to the ordinance asking that any student residing in Bangor that is currently enrolled in a secondary or post-secondary education welcome to participate. And that past muster, that's approved.
Mhm.
Is that
No, no, so
We-
sorry, nothing is approved. It's only been reviewed by legal. This would need, you would make a recommendation that would go through the council process.
Correct. I'm sorry, I missed.
Yeah.
But that language stands with legal. There's nothing that
Yes.
needs to be updated. Great, thank you. And then also a Bangor City Councilor that would be designated by the council chair to act as a liaison between the council and the committee. It's something that we've done informally in the past, and have had great success with, and being able to sort of have open conversation, learn more about what's happening at the council level, give more real-time updates. That has been really beneficial and successful. So that is something that we would love to recommend.
I had one thing to add, just because I noticed it now on the 3-part, it said a student residing in Bangor, would it be better to be the Bangor area? Or,
I think that's,
So the committee membership just says that preference will be given to residents of Bangor. The membership itself is not limited to residents of Bangor. But I think we kind of, because we had someone from high school in Bangor and someone, I think we just kind of kept with the Bangor theme.
okay,
So
But-
it could be a student from John Baptist who happens to live in Bangor.
Correct. We did not define what school, because I think in the past it was,
Yes, that's correct. But I would just say that this would be a recommendation for this to go into ordinance, so it would require, to Melissa's point, them to reside in
Correct.
Bangor unless that recommendation
that
is
changed.
altered. But right now, to Debbie's point, it is not written that way.
Mhm.
I think it's a little broader.
so the student one, I'm not sure how it's written, because I think it's isn't it a Bangor High School student? I think it's very specifically.
It does say
Bangor
It does
High
say-
School
it says
student.
Bangor High School.
Correct.
We discussed last time the opportunity not only to open it up to area high schools, but also, homeschool.
Any kind of
students.
schooling.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's
So that we
why,
do have a student perspective.
Right.
That's the goal.
In case anybody at home was curious how to navigate. to it.
2338,
Here. And so this is what it says right now.
student attending Bangor High School.
because it does say that it does currently say a current student attending Bangor High School and a Bangor resident attending some other post-secondary
Mhm.
education.
And hypothetically, it could just still say a student currently enrolled in a secondary or post-secondary education.
We left Bangor resident because that was clearly the original
Okay.
language, and we just tried to be broader with what education that student is pursuing.
Mhm. I would be open to it being a student residing in the Bangor area. It's the idea that, because it's sort of like which outweighs the other. If the ordinance says that preference is given, does that override a student having to reside in Bangor if we have a student otherwise, or is this language firm, so we should be as.
This
clear as
language is
possible?
firm that the student would have to reside in Bangor.
What are people's thoughts?
I do think that would limit, and me speaking from the BAPS perspective, most of our students are not from the city of Bangor.
Mhm.
So that means, I mean, we would have maybe a very small handful of students that would qualify for that role.
Is there a downside to changing the language to say a student residing in the Bangor area?
I
That I'm not
don't,
thinking of.
I don't believe so, and I think we were trying to hold fast to the prior language.
Yes, I agree
But-
with you.
But allow more flexibility.
Yeah, the student type, but not the student.
So we're kind of hanging on to some of the old and
Yeah,
broadening our net, if you will.
yeah. I would be open to changing it. If possible. Is that something that we would just make this change and then,
So because you don't have a quorum, you
Right.
can't actually make a recommendation on this ordinance
sure.
anyway, so this is just discussion.
Discussion.
So it's
Yeah.
good, you know, to at least get a sense of kind of what the committee that's present is thinking, but we will need to circle up in a committee, a meeting with a quorum in order for you all to make final decisions and then actually recommend the ordinance change to go to council.
So would we be saying then that a student from, for example, University of Maine, who lives in an apartment with some other people in Bangor?
Yeah.
That person would then be
They would
eligible?
qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they would.
yeah.
Okay,
But if you
Yep.
went to Bangor High School and now are at the University of Maine and living on campus, technically you wouldn't.
Under this, yeah.
Under,
the right
under the way
language.
that it stands now.
Correct.
I do like the idea of opening it up again. And, Courtney, can you remind me, of the timeline of reviewing this, updating this, and then bringing this before council, what that process looks like?
Yeah, so because this would be an ordinance change, typically what would happen is the committee would make a recommendation. It would go to Government Operations Committee. And presumably the chair and or vice chair would make a presentation to that committee. And then they would likely recommend it go to full council. And it would need 2 readings, which means it would be on 2 separate agendas that would allow for public comment and things like that before they actually vote on whether or not to adopt those changes.
Okay,
And so, and then if you're speaking more specifically around timeline, right now GovOps meets the first Monday of the month, so the next one is April 7th. You could always schedule a second meeting.
Mhm.
What is that, the 3rd week of April as well. And then, of course, the council meets the 2nd and 4th Monday of every month.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so you said GovOps meets the first Monday?
It
Yeah.
does.
Writing this down in the notes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, let's continue our discussion then of what we think would be best practice. So, the rest of that page, we didn't change anything.
So
The-
you did add designees
Oh,
under
I'm sorry.
the city manager
Yeah.
and the school superintendent.
Mhm.
And part of the thought was, is the school superintendent that maybe their designee may be a member of the DEIB committee of the
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
And, this will allow, Courtney to sub in, so it's never, you always have your core group. So those were the other changes.
Yes,
on
I'm
that
sorry, I
page.
skipped over that. Thank you very much. This next piece was adding an official, election of secretary for members. That's the only change there.
And the A with the struck language is just to clean up. That was original language from when the committee was created, in terms of how the terms would be staggered.
Okay,
It's no longer relevant now that you're an established committee beyond the first 3 years of operations.
I understand. Great, thank you. All right, the other thing we determined was putting in writing how often we meet. The original meeting said that we would only attend, the original ordinance, excuse me, said that we met quarterly. We just wanted to be clear that, we will be meeting more frequently, but in the event we're not able to have a meeting during a month, it doesn't hold us to an emergency meeting. If the language was to say that we meet every single month. And then attendance. This was the big piece that we talked about last time. And again, hopefully will help us address some of the things that we really hope to rectify so that we can move forward in with just more ease and more regularity. So before, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we had any expectation for attendance in here.
This is a whole new section.
Yeah, so putting in here, a piece on attendance, which we did discuss last meeting, was just to be able to identify, why we need folks to attend, but the expectation is for their attendance. And then some clarity around how that would actually play out. Understanding that, life happens. And people get sick and people have things scheduled out and work, and this is a volunteer committee. So we want to be flexible in that, but also not have it hold us back from opportunities to move forward. So what we had agreed upon last time is that members shall not be absent for more than 4 regularly scheduled meetings within the year. Unless they're excused, which we added subsection C, 3 on absences. And that over your 3-year term, the expectation is that you attend at least 75% of the regularly scheduled meetings and not be absent for more than 3 in a row, just because that could greatly influence, obviously, your awareness of what's happening and being up to date and feeling like you can be an active contributor. We always do, obviously, like we've said a million times, have the option to be on Zoom if something comes up. So we try to be as flexible as possible with those expectations. Subsection 3 absences was added. And so Courtney, will you share, is this where the changes?
No.
No, okay.
No,
Okay.
it's just highlighted differently to make sure that the committee, I think, chatted this through. That is the threshold for what is actually excused and what would not be excused, which is really, I think, the notice requirement, if I'm correct.
Yeah, because what we had talked about was, what does constitute an excused absence and how can we do this objectively? Again, because this is volunteer and we want to be as flexible as possible and welcoming and inclusive. I think the real goal is to have clarity around who's going to be at every meeting so that we can, if we need to adjust, we can, and we know what to expect. So giving prior notice would excuse you from a meeting if you are do not show, and we don't know where you are, and we don't know if you'll be coming, and we had intended for you to be there because there's specific business we need to attend to with your participation, that will be unexcused. Does anybody have any thoughts or feedback on what that expectation looks like, or how we might, if you have any ideas for objectivity in this, I would love to hear it.
My only question, which I want to bring to at least to discussion, is for the annual attendance of more than 4. That's unexcused absences, so to speak, right? Which is, do we feel that's a good threshold for that? I don't know, just because to get excused, which is, I think we're also trying to define what is excused or unexcused, but we're having a pretty open mind of if you're letting us know if something's going on, that's an excused absence, but having 4 unexcused seems like a lot. I'm not sure if that's everyone's pulse for that.
So you're saying that up here over the 3-year term?
I was looking at the annual one, but I guess both of them, I'm just wondering if that's a number we feel good about, because to be unexcused is, I feel kind of drastic in some way, because for the most part, you're just saying hey, I'm not gonna be able to make it tonight, something's going on. I think even that's pretty usually excusable. So having even a couple of those that are unexcused is kind of already a lot, because that just means you're kind of not.
Showing up. So
Showing up.
you're saying less than 4 should be
Yes.
It's my,
the expectation. And I think we just chose 4 because I actually don't know.
I think that, we could get into a bind if we try to define what an unexcused absence is,
Mhm.
and that makes it more subjective. And I think, if a member needs to be excused from a meeting, notifying, either Debbie or Courtney, perhaps with an email, something in writing would be appropriate. Rather than, either one of you having to say, well, is this a good excuse for the absence?
yeah,
I mean, we're all adults and responsible people who have volunteered to be on this committee, and I would think that would mean that if we can't make it to a meeting and we notify somebody, then that should be sufficient.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
I agree with that too. I think just any notice to any communication, I think is the
Right.
biggest part. If it's just, hey, something that happens, that's expected, I think, as this is a voluntary board.
So then, to your point, Melissa, having more than 4 regularly scheduled meetings missed. Are you saying,
So I'm thinking less, because kind of like what you're talking about, Mark, if it's, if we're just communicating, someone can't make it, that's an excuse after if you can't make it. If you're telling someone, I have something going on, I'm going to be on vacation, I
yeah,
have a medical, like, whatever's going on, that's fine. If something happens, you're like, oh crap, I forgot, you'll remember that, but having 4 of them that are unexcused, it's meaning not telling anyone for 4 times, just not showing up. That's why I was like, maybe that should be less, but I'm curious, but.
That would mean the person missing a quarter of the year if we meet monthly.
Yeah, and not
Right.
telling anyone that they're missing it too, which is the key part, cause like, again, if you're going on holiday and you're just having bad luck, I had bad luck last year, I think I had like 2 or 3 times where the meetings were, where I was like out of the state every time. That's bad luck, or if someone had a kid or something, right, like if you let people know you're not gonna be able to make it, of course, that's understandable, or even if it's last minute, something comes up, but just not communicating with anyone for at least 4 meetings seems like a lot.
So I think if you read the rest of the section, I think it becomes clearer. So I think that first section is really meaning to set an expectation.
Okay.
And then if you go to the second page, to Mark's point, it's like, you just need to let us know. You just need to let us know. And currently it does say that, but it does say that it needs to come both to the committee chair and to Courtney or I. And I think we'd all be pretty flexible with that as long as we knew somebody was okay and just couldn't make it. And then to Melissa's point, under notice and cause for removal, it's actually, if an individual gets to the point where they've missed 3 regular meetings or 2 in a row, we are gonna send that notice at that point.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
they won't,
But that does say, is still the excuse versus unexcused though.
correct,
Yeah. Okay, just making sure.
yes, but it says it shall not be absent. I think this shall not be absent for more than 4 regular scheduled meetings within a 12-month period unless excused, is what it already says on that first page. I think we were trying to create the attendance expectation.
With the warning, yeah.
Correct, is that this is what we're asking. If we want you to come, we want you to participate. This is the expectation. Is that gonna work for you? Is how I interpreted that first section.
right, so the expectation is that you don't miss. Well, should it be 3 then, if we're like looking at that 75% quarter expectation? No more than 3 meetings.
I will say, the way this would be written, just to play devil's advocate, would be that somebody could miss 3 in a row that don't count against them because they notified you. And then, miss 2 without notifying and then continue to miss all the rest. Simply because they gave notification.
And that's, I think that's why we have been stuck here, right? It's because we want,
Oh, but the reason we've been stuck in many ways is people aren't engaged with us.
That's true.
And I'm not sure that this is going to
fix it.
change that, because, I mean, we've made proactive outreach to say, is this really, we noticed you haven't been, maybe it doesn't fit into your schedule anymore, and that's fine. And, but people, when they want to make a commitment, want to believe on some level, they're gonna be able to uphold that commitment, so they're really hesitant to sound or feel like they quit or something, and so it's sort of been this.
that's true. For me, it's that I think we're missing opportunities here. Especially when we go back to the beginning of the ordinance where it really outlines the individuals that we want to engage with. That should, be identified from these different interest groups that could participate. We are filling chairs with individuals who are taking up the space from these interest groups and not coming. And so, yeah, to be perfectly honest, we're probably spending way too much time on the, what if, and, either people are gonna show up, and if they don't, and to be perfectly honest, I just want a fair and fast a way to move through individuals that aren't coming so that we can create better partnerships with the interest groups in our city and actually do the work rather than talking about this.
Correct.
Yeah.
So. Correct me, so my thought right now is that like,
It could be a starting point, to be fair. There's nothing stopping you guys from coming back and chatting about this if you felt that you needed to make an additional recommendation at a later date.
Right now, you have nothing.
Right.
yeah,
This would be something.
this would be something. And then, we are familiar with the process. So if we're saying, wow, 4 is way too much.
Right.
Um,
But people will be notified when they
Yes.
hit that 3, which is not currently happening.
correct,
Mhm.
correct.
And then.
So
there
I
is
guess
the
then my only
process.
question is that should the beginning expectation be 3? I do not remember why we fell on 4 because I thought it was quarterly. And we have that 75% and we have.
Committee's recommendation.
You get-
The only thing I'd point out is that B1 would just be, like whatever number is less than the threshold.
Okay.
For the purposes of the warning to make them aware, that's all.
Yeah.
It's the committee's recommendation as to what those numbers should, or what the threshold should be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other, and then can you just explain the hearing decision-making process?
Yep, so they would receive the notice, so this is part of the due process, part is, due process rights. They have the right to be essentially put on notice that they're in violation of the ordinance. And so that is what B1 is, and then 2 is, if they reach that threshold, then they have the opportunity to come to a hearing with the personnel committee, and have like their story told. Maybe they believed, and or had evidence they wish to present, for example, that they believe they only missed 2 instead of 3 meetings, for example. This would give them the opportunity to share that with the body that actually gets to make the decision to remove them from the committee. And then hearing and decision is the personnel committee actually doing its job in terms of making that determination as to whether or not they believe an attendance violation has occurred, and then whether or not to remove that person. And then because council appoint members through a council order, they would also remove individuals from a committee or this committee through a council order as well. And the reason why too, I just want to point out quickly that there's nothing about like reappointing or anything like that, is because there's already established process for reappointing once there's a vacancy.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions, thoughts, last minute recommendations? Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Are you good with this, or?
Is there, that was it, that
I
was.
believe so.
Those were all of the changes.
So,
Oh,
That's the ethics.
Yep, that's the next one. I will stop sharing this for now, but I can always bring it back up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap up that policy ordinance piece, the expectation is that we will need another meeting to officially make the recommendations and agree to those with forum. And then the chair and vice chair will deliver that to the GovOps committee whenever the next first Monday of the month arrives after our special meeting where we can approve that. Correct?
Yeah, you guys can, you get certainly, try to schedule another meeting.
Right.
Your next regular meeting, regularly scheduled meeting,
It's the
excuse me,
29th.
would be, yeah, April 29th.
Okay,
And then, so if you did not meet before that, then, actually, even if, well, let's say you didn't until the 29th, then it would go to GovOps on the 5th.
okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is the code of ethics, still under that policy and ordinance piece, code of ethics review. I invite city manager Lori to.
So, concerns about the code of ethics rise periodically. And, what we realized is we never proactively share with citizen appointed committees that the code of ethics also applies to all of you. We've been really good about doing your FOIA training. But we've not been really good about saying, by the way, the code of ethics as written applies to all of the counselors. It applies to all of their appointees, and you all are appointees. So we thought it might be helpful to at least highlight some of the sections of it. Basically, the city council and their appointees, you're a nonpartisanship body. So if you're not here to advance a partisan position, your mission is clearly laid out in the ordinance, and that's what we will continue to work on. That was under. Good gracious, there's a whole bunch of definitions. Getting to all of the, that basically unbiased contact. The expectation is that we will all conduct ourselves to an unbiased, fair, impartial, and equitable treatment of all persons. Kind of what the purpose of the committee is, not gonna fib. You're not going to participate directly in the approval of employment or purchases, which really does not fall under one of the core principles of this committee anyway. You're not involved in the hiring process, and you're not involved in the contracting process.
Can I
But
ask a
yeah, go
question
ahead.
there? I know there's been interest in the past from committee members, especially those that might have some, HR expertise of helping to cast a wider net for what that recruitment and retention working at the city of Bangor might look like. How does that, I guess, is that something that would be able to be done by a committee member in terms of like looking at the language?
Yes, the code of ethics is talking about an individual, like
Correct.
interfering like
Got
with
it.
the
Correct.
hiring process for, to benefit an individual,
Correct.
for example. But looking at
Or that
policy
you're-
level is okay.
That is wholly okay, but
Okay.
you as an individual also can have a business that you now want to sell your HR consulting services to.
Right, yeah, that would be,
Correct.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
The committee may at times come into contact with confidential information. I don't see how that would come up very often, if ever, in this committee. But it does say if you, for some reason, were privy to confidential information. And confidential information is defined by state statute for us as a municipal organization, is that you are to use it only for its purpose and not to share it. Use of social media. So this was a big provision here a few years ago. That we are suggesting, that it has nothing, talks about while working or during activities related to the public purpose. The big thing that we talk about is when we use our social media, depending on the role you play, you may give the appearance that you are speaking for the city based on your role.
Mhm.
So clearly identifying that your social media, we've got very specific language in here. There she is,
Right there.
right. Is the views I express on this site are my own and do not reflect any official view or position of the city of Bangor. So depending on, we have a number of our elected officials who do display this on their personal social media page. Some also maintain a separate social media page for their elected role or appointed role. I don't think we've got anybody in appointed role with a separate page,
I don't think so.
right? But it is to say, in your role as an appointed committee member, you in essence can be viewed as representing the city, so to be thoughtful about that.
Thank you.
Gifts and favors. We're not to accept gifts or favors, so, if we have a developer in town who wants to,
Wine and dine.
wine and dine, the answer is no. We don't do favors for somebody. If I let you use my space, can you help me write an ordinance? I mean, those are the kinds of things it's getting to. Again, I don't see it coming up much here, because this is an advisory committee. So we do have committees that have, authority to make decisions. This committee is an advisory committee and makes a recommendation for city council. The vast majority of our citizen appointed committees, in essence, are advisory. We have very few that actually have decision-making authority. Because most of that authority remains with the city council.
Mhm.
You're not gonna use, city-owned property for your own personal purposes. Likely, again, something that doesn't wholly apply here. But because this code of ethics applies to, virtually most of the entire workforce in some places, it's important. Also, we're not allowed, to do solicitations. So we can't do fundraising efforts or things like that. The only time we're allowed to do fundraising efforts is if those efforts have been specifically approved by the city council. Because we have engaged in those in the past on smaller scales. So because again, we represent the city, we're not asking somebody for donations, in any way, shape or form. What's the next big one? Representing third-party interests before city boards, I believe is the next one. That one goes on for the. So, for example, and this comes up more, again, I'm not sure that it really applies much to this committee. But for example, an elected official, you don't give up your rights as a citizen because you're an elected official, no different than you gave up your rights as a citizen because you chose to sit on this committee. But ensure that if you are gonna represent the interests of somebody else before a planning board or decision-making authority, that you can do this, appear as a witness, where
I
are we?
think C is related.
Okay. You can't appear on behalf of any third-party interest before a city agency for which they're a current member. Doesn't prohibit you, on behalf of your personal interest before appearing before any city agency. So again, you don't lose your right to go to the Board of Appeals.
But you have
Is
to
a
be
good
very clear that
example.
you're participating there as you're a person.
I'm trying to think of what else would. It's not likely to come up with this committee, but it's written broadly to cover every potential situation. Conflict of interest. Again, it talks about deliberations and votes prohibited. Again, this committee is making recommendations to, the city council or city council committee. So I don't believe that's going to come up much. Disclosure of conflict. For example, if somebody on the board, we just talked about the MLK breakfast.
Mhm.
So let's say that the MLK breakfast wanted to be hosted at a particular venue and you are related to the venue owner. You should always disclose those things. And then as a body, you determine if that person has a conflict of interest. You also want to appear So it's not just an conflicts of interest are kind of interesting because it's based on the information provided and the perception of everybody, but having the conversation openly and clearly and concisely is important. But it's just as important to be aware of the appearance of a conflict of interest
Mhm.
versus, the one about the catering company or something that you want to do business with. That's a pretty clear conflict of interest. But there can be just as much of an appearance. So always try to avoid the appearance of even a conflict. It is better even if you think there's a hint to raise the issue, have the discussion, and then hopefully that limits any potential appearance of conflict of interest. Extensions, so, if you had a special interest, the catering company, the venue or whatever, you would raise the issue. If the other members found that you had a conflict, you would then abstain from any vote on that issue. Obviously, even though your vote is only a recommendation to another committee, you should still refrain from that. Other than that, you have no ability to abstain unless you have a conflict. If you're present, you must vote. Right? Courtney's looking, which makes.
Oh, sorry, no, I think you're right. The
Okay.
disclosure Statement's not
Okay.
specific to
No,
them,
disclosure
so-
statement is not specific to you. Political activities. No one should be participating in any political activity which would be in conflict or incompatible with the performance of your functions and duties. So this always is kind of a difficult spot because you all have your First Amendment rights. So for example, the examples we set out for the city council is if you are a sitting city councilor and you are going door to door with a candidate for city council, you are likely to be identified as a city council who's being a proponent of a particular candidate. It could make a difference to the person that you're contacting. If you are going door to door and dropping off mailers for a particular political party, one of, tens and twenties or thirties of other people who are doing that, it is unlikely that your recognition would lead to somebody making a determination as to who they're gonna vote for in a federal election. So if you wanted to put people's political signs on your lawn, great. There's no issue with that, but it's about how, you engage in a political activity that could be viewed as influencing the outcome.
And it's, just to be clear, is it, I know you gave a city
Yeah.
international example.
Yeah.
But was that because the difference is in terms of how many folks are soliciting votes, or because it's a local election versus a national election?
Because you are likely to be identified and have more influence over a local election. And it's not, it would be unusual.
Okay.
You think of other examples that we included in here, Courtney? I didn't think to bring that with me.
No, I think it's just, keeping in mind that you're not supposed to use your official authority or position, basically to influence or interfere,
Right.
with, elections and things of that nature. It's just to be thoughtful and mindful, I think, in that way.
Right. Use of titles and disclaimers. You heard a prime one tonight. When speaking, it's best to ensure that if you're using your title, making a written or an oral statement, you can use your title only when it doesn't violate some other version of the code of ethics. But if a position has been specifically taken by the city council, it's consistent with a position established by the city. It represents it reflects a certain position, and it's made, if you're not, in this case, Mr. Beck, Citizen Beck, came up and clearly stated, while I am a city councilor, I am here to speak as an individual, and I am not speaking on behalf of the city council or the city. I'm speaking here as an individual. So clearly identifying, because members of the public, they may recognize you in that role. So when you're speaking, you want to make sure that the public is well aware of the role you are in when you are speaking.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this section does also talk about like, for example, if you all were to, when you have a quorum vote, to make a recommendation on this ordinance, that would empower the chair and vice chair to speak on your behalf around making a recommendation for that ordinance. But if you were to just attend like planning board, for example, it's important as in subsection C disclaimers that you make very clear that you're speaking on your own behalf as an individual, and there are actually a few different
examples.
suggested sentences or things you could say to make it clear in what capacity you're speaking. Because again, to Debbie's point, you may think that because I didn't say that, you know, I'm on the acre committee or something, that they may not know, but these meetings are public. You know, the whole idea is to be out in the community and doing certain things, so it's just important to make sure that you give that disclaimer.
Thank you.
We have a section on incompatibility of employment or office. Again, I believe in the advisory committee that this would have limited implications. If you had, well, I don't know, we could perhaps use the committee chair, who is also an elected official as a school board member. Don't believe those two offices are incompatible. But if it's when the duties of the other office that make it almost impossible to discharge your duties on this committee. When there's a rub. If years one, you couldn't also serve on a committee that or work for an entity that now reports to another entity that you have some sort of authority in either, because that could create a conflict.
I also think we have 3 current or former city councilors that resigned from this committee to actually become a city councilor.
Yes, I think of that often.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm assuming it makes sense, obviously, because we're advising the city council, but also in
Right.
terms of how that would work in the personnel committee. If you're on the personnel committee, now you're appointing individuals to
Right.
serve on this committee.
So it's a good example of why that may be viewed as an incompatible.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Ethics and contracting, you all do not contract. We'll save you some time there.
Yeah, and then the rest of it's just the.
Right, the rest of it is the Board of Ethics.
Thank you for that. I think well, first of all, does anyone have any questions? No. My only question would be, for example, what I was thinking about when both Vice Chair Buckles and I attended, the community iftar that we received an invitation to, last week. It was of a community event, and there were a lot of individuals that were there, not for religious purposes, even though it was a religious ceremony, but to, you know, engage with the community. In terms of, you know, our opportunities that might exist to support events like that, I have an assumption of how that would work in terms of our ability to support larger events or share larger events if they're religiously affiliated. But I didn't see anything about religion in that code of ethics.
I've
I
never
would
heard.
say if the full committee, the majority of the committee is in support of supporting something like that, that's certainly, I think,
Right.
up to the committee to sort of chat through and vote on.
Okay, I just want to be just mindful of, yeah, absolutely, you know, extending invitations.
Right.
So many things that we're doing as not only members of this committee, but also in our personal lives are, you know, really upholding and bringing awareness to populations that might not otherwise be able to share, you know, the great work that they're doing in community building. I just wasn't sure how we could walk that fine line of city work and.
You know, just thinking earlier, we were chatting about the makeup of the committee, the council appoints individuals to this committee, and I believe one of those items listed is religion.
That's true.
So
You're right.
I'm
That's true.
not entirely surprised that at some point that could be discussed by the committee. I think it's part of inclusion.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. I like that. Great, thank you. All right, any other business on for our committee? Seeing none at this time, can we have a city manager update, please?
Yeah, you looked at that and you went, oh, gosh, what did I say last night? So, just a couple of things, especially as we see now, both at the federal and state level. There have been continuing resolutions or budget adopted. So what that will mean is at least there will be not be a government shutdown of any type, which is beneficial. But what we are seeing is it is likely that there will be continued implications of the change at the federal level on funding and policy decisions. At this point, we have not seen a reduction in grant funding. We have not had our grant funding pulled back, which is a common question we get. We are just now beginning to see renewals. So I'm not sure what those are gonna look like, but if there's any changes there, we'll let you know. You've heard people say they haven't been able to access their grant funds. We have not encountered that in any way, shape, or form. So, earlier this month, myself and 3 city councilors, as well as a number of other, elected officials, and municipal officials in the state of Maine had the chance to go to a conference in DC. And part of that conference is we actually have the opportunity to meet with all of our federal delegation. So it was really great to be able to, they were very welcoming, they understood. We highlighted specific issues, related to how do you communicate with us better? These are the programs that we value. We understand that every administration has the opportunity and the chance to change priorities, and that's fine. But you need to communicate with us. We need a little bit of heads up. If there's a way to taper off things instead of just, sort of a full on shutdown, that would be really helpful. We talked about, the partnerships that we do have, because a lot of the work that happens that is a priority of the federal government is actually happening at the local level. So how do we continue to keep those partnerships alive? One of the things that we talked about quite a bit too, because I think it's really unique to us here in Maine, is the conversation about tariffs. So tariffs with Mexico and Canada have very different implications depending upon where you live. And I think I picked the Indiana last night. I said, I'm sure if I live in Indiana, I'm sure the fact that there's gonna be tariffs on Canada or that kind of discourse with Canada doesn't really impact me. But we talked a lot about the impact that it's having on Maine, because we are basically closer to Canada in many ways than we are the rest of the contiguous United States. So they were very aware and sensitive to that, to the point where, Senator Collins shared, for us specifically, we were talking about our relationship with Irving Oil.
Right.
We're concerned about it from a heating standpoint, but we're also concerned about it, selfishly as a municipality, is where we buy all our aviation fuel. And the impact that has on us.
Yeah.
And, and she had been able to speak with, I think, even some of the provinces too?
Yep.
I knew she had spoken with some of the province leaders. She had spoken with, the chief executives at Irving and talking about how we're gonna kind of make sure that this doesn't negatively impact Maine. So it was really great. And it's interesting, the timing of that visit was 2 days before the Senate vote on the continuing resolution. And Senator King said, here are my choices. What would you do? And he said, a federal government shutdown has such detrimental impacts across this country versus a continuing resolution that I don't like either. I mean, he was very open about, it's the lesser of two evils that I'm gonna be looking for. So, for right now, things seem to be, fairly stable. The state last week passed its budget. They had to do that and then immediately adjourn. The reason they had to do that is so that it would have 90 days to go into effect. So this way there will not be a state government shutdown on July 1st. But what they've done now is just returned back to their business. So we'll continue to see lots of changes, I think, in the next couple of months. So those were kind of my big my big points.
May I ask before we move on from this,
Yeah.
did Senator Collins say what those conversations were looking like with the provinces?
So, I mean, just talking about, look, we're here together.
Okay,
We're always gonna be part of you and
Okay.
pushing back on Irving and saying, you know, if there are momentary blitzes, you've gotta kind of hang with us.
okay,
Yeah, and I was at the Hot Stove League last weekend. And Versant shared that Senator Collins had also reached out to the electricity providers in New Brunswick. Because a lot of our power comes in
Right.
from New Brunswick as well, so Versant had also shared that they had similar conversations with Senator Collins on that front. So, we're very lucky to be well represented in DC. So.
I have a couple of questions for you additionally. Are there any other questions about city manager Lori's updates? Okay, thank you. I feel like we've been hearing a lot about the encampment.
encampment?
Not gonna say it, just wait for
Yes. So there was a significant amount of misinformation.
There is a lot of talk out there.
Correct. So the city, the outreach workers, both housing, outreach, case managers have been in that space for 5 months every day. They have interacted with everyone who is willing to interact. The vast majority of individuals are no longer in that space. Some of them are into permanent housing, some of them are in temporary housing. Some of them just did not want to engage in that and chose to leave in lieu of engaging in that conversation in any way. And we do know that some will just move elsewhere to remain unsheltered in the city. It's a relatively, it's a lower amount than what we had been prepared for at this point. And then what we had done is people exited the space. We worked with every individual on site to say, this is the day we're gonna come in and we're gonna begin to start putting together piles. So there were assertions that we were demolishing a tent with somebody in it. That was not true. And if you actually watched and listened to the video, you could hear that explanation being provided. The individual had identified that they had forgotten something. The individual, we had worked with that individual and they said, yeah, this is all of the stuff I want gone. And we're like, great. And we were working on it and the person dashed back in front of the equipment because had forgotten something. Interestingly enough, the thing they had forgotten was a propane tank. Interestingly enough, the fact that that person went back to get it may have been a real save for the employee. Had they somehow used a piece of equipment and punctured it, it could have been really bad. So, yes. So I get it. People wish that there was a different way, but we have given lots of time and space and support for individuals to make a choice and participate. And people have chosen to participate in different ways and at different levels. We've also been very aware and conscious of the ability of an individual to engage, because that varies by individual. So if we've tried to work with somebody and this person, these two don't just get along. So we'll come along with another person to try to find that fit. But every individual is aware, they're aware every time. They have 24 to 48 hours notice of every time we're bringing equipment in there. They are well aware of it. So
What's the current status now?
there are very few households left, and that all of that work will be winding up over the next few days.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Thank
want to
you.
wind that up by the end of the month. And then what you will see is we're just piling. Because when we remove debris, it's a whole different process. And we'd like to be able to do so and do the whole thing at once. So it also, what we found is if we don't remove sites that people have moved away from, new individuals take up residence, and that's not, we've determined that, that space needs to be cleared. So it's not good for them either. So we have provided opportunities for reunification. We've worked with family members. We've transported individuals. We've stored items. There's a lot of talk too that, what are people gonna do? There's no beds available in the shelters. When we're working, especially in that area, we have worked with the shelters to hold beds. So individuals do have the opportunity to go into shelter. But if that bed isn't used by that person, that bed is going to be used by somebody else. So we work very collaboratively with all of the partners. in the
Thanks for
community.
coming. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
Any other
you.
rumors that you've heard that you want to
No,
ask?
I mean, those were, I think. the
Okay.
big
No, I'm glad you did.
Any other, thank you for that update.
Yep.
And then lastly, I was just hoping for an update on the, city hall renovations.
You've been in there more than I have.
Yeah, I was in there recently. It's coming along well. In fact, it does, the first floor looks quite different, but in a good way, I think. And so I think we're
Is it
still
still like
being
June?
told that they'll probably wrap up end of May, June-ish.
Correct.
However, like, as you might imagine, having renovated the first floor, for departments that were formerly up on, like the second floor, for example, in the storage and everything else, it's gonna take, some time for us to kind of transition back in. Because we have to rework a good portion of the second floor for the school, and figure out, storage and, actually physically move, of course, from here. So my hope, I guess, would probably be by like the end of summer. Hopefully we are, fully back in.
And does that mean, I mean, the first floor will be done with the, like, everybody will be able to move back in?
That's the hope,
Okay,
yes.
Okay. I didn't know if they were moving in pieces or.
We
We
probably will need to, but hope that shouldn't disrupt, hopefully, like customer service or anything. It'd be like, for example, some of the first departments to go back will be those that are mostly internal. That wouldn't impact like a citizen coming to register their car or anything like that. And we do need to coordinate to some degree to make sure that if there is an impact, that it is minimal as possible to those that need access to our services.
Wonderful.
And, yeah, hopefully next month I might have just a little bit more to offer. We'll see.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
and
jumped the gun. I'm
actually,
just curious.
I should also just, let you know too, that we are also working with the Historical Society. They have a lot of artifacts, excuse me, specific to Bangor, and they're actually looking to do some sort of, I think, timeline, in council chambers that kind of lays out
Oh, that would be lovely.
things and so actually if there's opportunity, I may connect Katie with the chair of the Historical Society too, because that might be a good opportunity just to start with a conversation and see if that's helpful or
Yeah,
not. I don't
we've been
know, but-
talking about doing that too, just
Yeah.
providing an opportunity to have more relationships and
Yeah.
meetings together. Like
Yeah.
we did at Parks and Rec and like we'll hopefully continue to do. So
Yeah.
I
And
think that would be wonderful.
yeah, you may remember too that the school used to have a lot of student artwork on the walls, and so there'll be a section where that will continue as well. And so, yeah, we're really looking forward to it. I think it'll be fantastic in terms of 9 out of 10 times, if a citizen is coming into City Hall, they will be able to get their needs met on the first floor. It'll be, better accessible and for accessibility and things of that nature, so.
I can't remember, our council chambers going to be on the
Yes.
First floor.
That's wonderful.
Yep.
I can't remember that. Thank you. Great. Any other questions, comments? We have no need to officially adjourn since this was a conversation and not a meeting. So I thank you all for your time and for being
Thank you.
here and for our visitors sharing and talking.